In this video, we will rank the 9 wars in Warhammer 40k with the most Space Marine deaths and casualties. There will be indeed some that were given proper numbers, while others were vague and we would have to estimate for ourselves, well, educated guesses. So let's get to it. At number 9 we have the Badab War. The Badab War was a conflict in the 41st Millennium in the year 913 that occurred due to a few Astartes chapters withholding the Imperial tithe and opposing Imperial bureaucratic incursion to the autonomous workings of a chapter and the worlds they take care of. This kicked off when the Astral Claws under Huron rallied a few other chapters including the Lamenters, Executioners and the Mantis Warriors and went head to head with the Imperial forces. On the other side, the loyalist Space Marines included the Minotaurs, the Red Scorpions, the Fire Angels, the Nova Marines, the Carcharodons aka Space Sharks and more. The war was a mess, with a lot of casualties, and ended with Huron's forces being crushed and the conversion of him into Huron Blackheart, a Chaos Warlord, and the birth of a new Chaos Warband. Now, before the conflict, the Astral Claws had grown above the limits set by the Codex Astartes, them having up to 3,500 Astartes or Space Marines, and plus the 3 other renegade chapters. One side would number around 7,000 Astartes at most. The loyalists sent to deal with these renegades included 13 chapters, with some at full strength, while others only sending a few companies. But all in all, they came up to a total of around 88 companies, or 8,800 Space Marines. But at the end of the war, only 200 of the Astral Claws survived and fled to the warp, and what was left of the other 3 was sent on penitent crusades for redemption. All in all, between 5,000 to 7,000 Space Marines were lost on both sides, and this is just a rough educated estimate. Number 8. The 13th Black Crusade. So Abaddon the Despoiler, the ultimate villain of the 41st Millennium, had tried his luck 12 times before, but this time he meant business. The 13th Black Crusade was a do-or-die moment, a last-ditch gamble to bring down the Imperium from within its heart. Abaddon amassed a huge force from the Eye of Terror, with traitor legions like the Black Legion, the Iron Warriors and Thousand Suns, as well as countless demonic allies. His goal? The forest world of Cadia, the gatekeeper of the Eye of Terror, which was heavily defended by the Cadian shock troops, with the Space Marine chapters like the Black Templars, the Blood Angels and more, and the mighty titans of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The war was cataclysmic, with Abaddon unleashing devastating chaos sorcery, demonic engines and his famous planet killer ship, the Black Fortress, to crack Cadia open like an egg, and causing the Great Rift. All in all, from the defenders' side, there were a total of no less than 50,000 Space Marines involved, with a strength equivalent to 50 chapters being deployed in Cadia, Medusa, Agrippina and also Diamor as well as Perlia. No doubt the casualties were massive, but the exact numbers are unknown, but highly likely in the high thousands, or maybe even crossing 10k. Number 7. The Third War for Armageddon. So Armageddon, the name says it all. This was a hotly contested industrial world that caught the eye of Ghazghkull Thraka, the biggest baddest orc warboss in the galaxy as of the 41st and 42nd Millennium. The Third War for Armageddon kicked off when Ghazghkull brought his Waaagh crashing down on the planet once again, determined to finish what he had started decades earlier with the Second War for Armageddon. The Imperium scrambled to respawn, with chapters like the Black Templars, the Blood Angels, the Salamanders rushing to defend the Hive cities alongside the Imperial Guard. And the fighting was brutal, chaotic and widespread, with the orcs unleashing everything from foot soldiers to gargantuan war machines like Stompers and Gargants. It was a war fought on the streets of the Hive cities, in the deserts and everywhere, in the jungles of the equatorial region and the radioactive ashways, with no quarter asked or given since you're fighting orcs. The total Space Marine numbers deployed there were around 50,000, and maybe more if we include the Second and the First War for Armageddon, and so the losses will be similar to the previous entry, maybe even more. Number 6. The Pale Wasting. During the Dark Era known as the Nova Terra Interregnum, the Imperium of Man was fractured into warring factions, and also at the same time, a mysterious threat emerged from the Ghoul Stars known only as the Pale Wasting. Inquisitorial investigations have found conflicting references to this threat, describing it as both a star-spawn plague that decimated human worlds, and also as nightmare engines that annihilated entire sectors. Most records related to this conflict had been censored or redacted. There were a total of 12 chapters of Space Marines that were sent there to the Ghoul Stars to fight this strange threat, and out of these only the Nova Marines survived, and with a fraction of its chapter strength. So out of the 12 chapters, or 12,000 deployed Marines, more than 11,500 would have died, with 11 chapters wiped out of existence. Number 5. The devastation of Baal. Baal, homeworld of the Blood Angels, became a literal war zone when the Tyranids of High Fleet Leviathan descended upon it like a swarm of locusts. This wasn't just an incursion, a small incursion, but a full-on invasion of a High Fleet. The Blood Angels and their successor chapters under the Sanguinary Brotherhood, like the Flesh Tearers, the Angels Vermilion, and the Blood Drinkers and many more, stood against the tide of bioengineered horrors. The fight was desperate, as the Blood Angels fought tooth and nail against endless waves of Tyranid warriors, monstrous creatures, and biotitans. At the darkest moment when all seemed lost, a great rift tore across the galaxy, with even the warriors of Khorne coming to the aid of the Blood Angels, which is kind of ironic since Ka'Bandha, the leader of these forces, wanted to kill the Blood Angels himself. However, I digress. The arrival of the Indominous Crusade also, under the command of Roboute Guilliman, turned the tide. Reinforcements including Primaris Marines helped drive the Tyranids back, but not without terrible losses, including many of the Blood Angels' mightiest heroes. All in all, there were close to 30,000 Marines of the Sanguinary Brotherhood in the war, and with a total of 27,000 dead, including 8 chapters wiped out and 7 others becoming devoid and demoted to non-combat status. Such was the devastation of Baal. Number 4. The War of the Beasts. Not long after the Horus heresy had faded into legend, the galaxy was thrown back into chaos once again by an Orc invasion, so massive it dwarfed any before it. The War of the Beast. The Orcs were led by a warboss of such size and cunning that he was called the Beast, and was intelligent way beyond others. It launched a galaxy-wide assault that brought the Imperium to its knees. This wasn't just a bunch of greenskins with clubs, they had war moons, colossal battleships, and technology that was highly advanced. The Imperium had to marshal every resource to fight back, with the Space Marine chapters like the Imperial Fist, who suffered near annihilation, and their successor chapters like the Black Templars and even the White Scars and other Ultramarines and many other Space Marine chapters taking the lead in a desperate, brutal struggle. Even the Custodians and the Sisters of Silence were called to arms. The beast was ultimately defeated, but not without heavy massive sacrifice and a staggering loss of life across the galaxy. At the Defense of Terra and the pushback to Olenor, there were many tens of thousands deployed, and the losses were heavy. Imagine, there were 8,000 dead in just the counterattack on Olenor, not to mention the campaigns on the attack moon that came to Terra and its defense. Number 3. The Rangdan Xenocides. So back during the Great Crusade, the Imperium faced a Xenos threat so dire that it almost rivaled the Horus heresy itself. This was the Rangdan Xenocides, 3 of them. So the Rangdan were an ancient, terrifying alien race with psychic powers and technology that could rival the Imperiums. They were described as near demonic, and their war against humanity was a bloody campaign across multiple sectors. The Space Marine Legions, remember, this was during the Great Crusade. Particularly the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves led the charge, backed by vast regiments of the Imperial Army and the Mechanicum's Titans and war machines. The war saw entire worlds wiped out, and populations exterminated in a conflict of dire circumstances. The Imperium eventually prevailed, but the losses were severe, and some say that the Rangdan Xenocides sowed the seeds of mistrust and paranoia that would later feed on into the dark days of the heresy. All in all, for the 3 Rangdan Xenocides, there was a total of between 300 and 400,000 Space Marines that were deployed, and with a total of 80,000 dead, including 55,000 just from the Dark Angels Legion. At number 2 we have the Indominous Crusade. Yeah, surprising, right? After the Great Rift split the galaxy into 2, Roboute Guilliman, a newly resurrected Primarch of the Ultramarines, realized that he had to save the Imperium. Thus began the Indominous Crusade, a campaign to reclaim the worlds lost to chaos and bring hope back to a beleaguered realm of humanity. Guilliman gathered a massive force of Space Marine chapters, including newly created Primaris Marines created under the supervision of Belisarius Cawl. It was as much of a political maneuver as it was a military one, with Guilliman attempting to stabilize the realm his father had left in his hands. One of the most profound events during this crusade was the Ultima founding, in which more than 100 new chapters were formed, and these were composed of Primaris Marines. Of the hundreds of thousands of Primaris Space Marines created by Archmagus Belisarius Cawl, half were formed into these new chapters, while the rest were gathered into 9 armies of Legion size. Remember the Legion size emphasis, which means a minimum of 10,000. They were called the Unnumbered Sons. The Unnumbered Sons served as a reserve force for Guilliman during the Indominous Crusade, with their ranks slowly reduced by attrition and the need to replenish already existing chapters. At the end of the 12 years of the Crusade, there were no more than 20,000 left, which were also formed into new Primaris chapters. So all in all, there would have at least been 70,000 unnumbered sons dead, plus tens of thousands of others across the many engagements, which would maybe total to around 100,000 Astartes dying in the Indominous Crusade. But even this pales in comparison to the number 1 spot, the Horus heresy, the granddaddy of them all. The Horus heresy was the cataclysmic civil war that nearly tore the Imperium apart. It all started when Horus Lupercal, the war master of the Imperium and the beloved son of the Emperor, fell into the whispers of chaos. He turned against his father, taking half of the Space Marine legions with him, along with their Primarchs. What followed was a series of brutal battles across the stars, brother against brother, Primarch against Primarch, Space Marine Legion against Space Marine Legion. After a bitter, bloody conflict, the Emperor himself slew Horus, but was mortally wounded himself in the process, leading to his entombment in the Golden Throne. Remember that during this conflict, the Space Marine factions were all legion-sized, and yeah, with some legions being smaller than others. So if we take into account the fact that just the Ultramarines alone had 250,000 and lost a staggering 100,000 in the defending of the realm of Ultramar, the total number of casualties in the heresy would chart off the roof. Remember that 3 legions were reduced to chapter size, the Salamanders, the Iron Hands, and the Raven Guard. So when looking up Lexicanum, the total number of Astartes active there during the heresy would have been more than 2.35 million, including both sides, and I would say that both would lose over 1 million each during the entire civil war, and that is including the heavy recruitment that was done to revamp their army sizes. So yeah, that is a lot. But that's just a fraction of what the Imperial Guard loses in a standard or a small conflict. Anyway, if you like this video, then watch this other one too. And if you want to browse for other sci-fi and Warhammer content, then check out our channel. So subscribe and like for support. And yeah, while you're at it, bang on the bell icon for notifications on new video uploads. Till the next time, take care, boys.